At 6:30 p.m. on April 26, 1991, the town of Andover, Kansas, was calm. Friday evening routines were underway in this community of 4,400 people, just east of Wichita. 17 minutes later, Andover was erased from the map. The tornado warning system was activated, but the storm still seemed distant. What the system could not see was that the tornado was rapidly intensifying and accelerating. The technology designed to protect Andover had been outsmarted. How did one of the most violent tornadoes in Kansas history strike a warned community with such devastating effect? In 1991, America's tornado detection relied on technology from the 1950s. The WSR-57 radar could see storms, but it was essentially blind to their internal structure. The system could not detect the rapid intensification occurring inside the Andover supercell. These antiquated radar systems displayed precipitation echoes, but could not see wind velocity or rotation, the critical signature of tornadic activity. National Weather Service forecasters were essentially operating with one eye closed, using equipment designed when Harry Truman was president. The WSR-57 radar had a 2-degree beam width, meaning it could detect storms but could not distinguish between harmless rain and catastrophic rotation. At 30 miles away, the radar beam was nearly a mile wide, missing crucial small-scale features. This technical limitation was devastating on April 26, 1991. As the Andover supercell evolved, meteorologists could see it was strong, but could not detect the rapid intensification happening within the storm. The radar indicated the storm might be weakening as it approached Andover, the exact opposite of what was actually happening. Former National Weather Service meteorologist Mike Smith explains that the technology was doing what it was designed to do, but that what it was designed to do was fundamentally inadequate for the task of protecting lives from violent tornadoes. April 26, 1991, featured textbook conditions for violent tornado development across south-central Kansas. A powerful jet stream positioned directly overhead created strong upper-level dynamics. At the surface, a warm front had pushed northward through Kansas, bringing Gulf moisture and temperatures in the mid-80s. What made this setup particularly dangerous was the extreme temperature contrast. North of the warm front, temperatures were in the 50s. This 30-degree temperature difference across a short distance created exceptional wind shear, the changing of wind direction, and speed with height that is crucial for tornado formation. Atmospheric instability values exceeded 4,000 joules per kilogram, nearly double what is typically needed for significant tornado development. Storm chasers and meteorologists recognized this explosive potential hours before the first storms formed. Storm researcher Dr. Eric Rasmussen recalls that they were looking at convective available potential energy, known as CAPE, values that afternoon that were literally off the charts for their forecasting tools. The atmosphere was loaded like a spring, ready to unleash unprecedented energy. By mid-afternoon, the Storm Prediction Center had issued a rare high-risk outlook for severe weather. But even this could not capture the extreme violence that would unfold. The stage was set for a once-in-a-generation severe weather event. Despite the dangerous conditions brewing overhead, many Andover residents went about their Friday evening routines with little concern. This was, after all, Kansas in spring, where tornado warnings were commonplace, almost background noise for longtime residents. Part of the problem was what psychologists call warning fatigue. In 1991, tornado warnings had a 70% false alarm rate nationally. For every legitimate warning, residents had experienced multiple instances where nothing happened. This created a dangerous complacency. Andover resident Margaret Simmons recalled that they had heard tornado warnings dozens of times before. She said that usually the storm would pass north or south of them. They would go outside, look at the sky, maybe see some dark clouds, and then go back to their normal activities. This complacency was compounded by the limitations of warning dissemination in 1991. Cable television penetration was much lower. There were no smartphones, no weather apps, and no social media alerts. Many residents relied solely on outdoor warning sirens, which were designed only to alert people who were outdoors, not those inside their homes. Local media covered the developing situation, but without the sophisticated storm tracking graphics of today, it was difficult to communicate the exact path and timing. Many residents believed the storm was tracking north of Andover and would miss their community entirely. This false sense of security proved deadly. Of the 17 fatalities, post-event surveys revealed that 13 had received some form of tornado warning, but did not take protective action until it was too late. What made the Andover tornado particularly lethal was its deceptive evolution. The tornado initially formed southwest of Wichita and tracked northeast, appearing to weaken after crossing Interstate 35. Radar echoes suggested the storm might be losing strength as it approached Andover. In reality, the tornado was undergoing what meteorologists now recognize as cyclic intensification. The original circulation was indeed weakening, but a new, more powerful circulation was rapidly developing, a process that was nearly impossible to detect with 1991 radar technology. As the storm approached Andover, it made an unexpected southward turn and explosively intensified to F5 strength. Wind speeds likely exceeded 260 miles per hour as it grew to over a mile wide. This rapid transformation from apparent weakness to catastrophic strength happened in less than 10 minutes. Tornado researcher Dr. Howard Bluestein calls this a perfect example of a radar gap scenario. The critical intensification occurred in a blind spot of our observation system. By the time we realized what was happening, the F5 tornado was already on the ground heading for Andover. The storm's forward speed also increased to 35 miles per hour as it approached the town, giving residents even less time to react once they realized the danger. The combination of rapid intensification, unexpected motion, and increased speed created what meteorologists now call a worst-case scenario for warning operations. At 6:41 p.m., meteorologists at the Wichita National Weather Service office realized their error. The storm was not weakening. It was becoming a mile-wide monster, moving directly toward Andover. They issued an urgent tornado warning, but by then, the margin for error had evaporated. The warning was issued just 6 minutes before the tornado struck the Golden Spur Mobile Home Park on Andover's western edge. Even with perfect information dissemination, which did not exist in 1991, this would have been insufficient time for residents to take appropriate shelter. The warning system's failure cascaded through multiple levels. First, the radar technology could not detect the rapid intensification. Second, the warning dissemination relied primarily on outdoor sirens and media broadcasts, which many residents did not hear or see. Third, the short lead time made evacuation of vulnerable structures like mobile homes virtually impossible. Former warning coordination meteorologist Dick Elder said they were essentially fighting the tornado blind. By the time storm spotters could visually confirm what was happening, the tornado was already causing catastrophic damage. In the Golden Spur Mobile Home Park, where 13 of the 17 fatalities occurred, many residents had no basement shelter options. The community storm shelter was nearly a quarter-mile away, too far to reach with only minutes of warning. Some residents attempted to flee in vehicles, a dangerous decision that proved fatal as the mile-wide vortex engulfed escape routes. At 6:47 p.m., the Andover tornado reached its maximum intensity just as it struck the western edge of town. With winds exceeding 260 miles per hour and a damage path over a mile wide, it was one of the most powerful tornadoes ever documented in Kansas. The destruction was absolute. Brick homes were swept clean from their foundations, a signature of F5 damage. Steel I-beams from industrial buildings were twisted and scattered across the debris field. Homes were twisted like pipe cleaners. Vehicles were picked up and thrown over 300 yards. Some never recovered. In the Golden Spur Mobile Home Park, 223 of 240 homes were completely destroyed. First responder Captain Mike Fitzpatrick described the scene. It wasn't damage, it was obliteration. Where homes had stood, there was nothing but bare concrete slabs. Walls, roofs, furniture, and appliances were simply gone. The tornado's extreme intensity was captured in rare video footage showing multiple vortices rotating around the main funnel, a phenomenon associated with the most violent tornadoes. These suction vortices created localized areas where wind speeds likely approach 300 miles per hour, causing damage that defied traditional scales. As the tornado moved through Andover, it maintained F4 to F5 intensity for 17 catastrophic minutes. The damage path extended 46 miles, though the most intense destruction was concentrated in a 4-mile stretch through Andover itself. When the tornado finally lifted northeast of town, It had caused an estimated $250 million in damage, over $525 million in today's dollars. From first impact to final dissipation over Andover, the tornado carved a path of unprecedented destruction through the community. In just 17 minutes, 300 homes were completely destroyed, and another 1,500 were damaged. McConnell Air Force Base on Wichita's eastern edge suffered significant damage to its housing areas. The tornado's forward speed of 35 miles per hour allowed little reaction time once it became visible. Many survivors reported having less than 30 seconds between seeing the tornado and experiencing its full fury. Survivor Jason Thornton recalled one moment he was looking out his window at some dark clouds. The next moment, my ears popped. There was a roar like a freight train, and then my entire house exploded around me. I had no time to even get to my basement. The tornado's width, over a mile at its maximum, meant that traditional shelter advice was sometimes insufficient. Some residents who reached interior bathrooms or closets still suffered injuries when their entire homes were swept away. Only those in underground storm shelters or basements had reliable protection from the F5 winds. In the aftermath, search and rescue operations were hindered by complete darkness as the tornado had destroyed power infrastructure throughout the region. Emergency responders worked through the night using flashlights and vehicle headlights to search for survivors trapped in debris. The 17 fatalities, while tragic, represented a remarkably low number, given the tornado's extreme intensity and the limitations of the warning system. Weather historians attribute this to a combination of luck. The tornado struck in the early evening rather than during the overnight hours, and the quick actions of those who recognized the danger despite the warning system's failures. Dawn on April 27th revealed the full extent of the catastrophe. Aerial footage showed a damage path resembling a giant bulldozer track through Andover. The Golden Spur Mobile Home Park was unrecognizable. Nothing remained except scattered debris and bare concrete pads. First responders described scenes of total devastation, unlike anything they had encountered before. Rescue coordinator Robert Daniels said he had worked dozens of tornado disasters, but this was different. The level of destruction was absolute. In the worst-hit areas, there was nothing left to search through. Everything had been carried away. The tornado had literally scoured the earth in some locations. Grass was stripped from the ground, asphalt peeled from roads, and underground utilities were exposed. Trees were not just stripped of branches, they were completely debarked and snapped at ground level. Cars were found wrapped around remaining tree trunks or crushed beyond recognition. Andover High School suffered severe damage, with portions of the roof and walls collapsed. Had the tornado struck during school hours, the casualty count would have been dramatically higher. Infrastructure damage complicated recovery efforts. Water mains were broken, power lines were down, and roads were impassable because of debris. Andover's small hospital was quickly overwhelmed, necessitating the transport of 225 seriously injured survivors to Wichita hospitals. Those injured presented with typical tornado trauma, including lacerations from flying glass, broken bones from collapsing structures, and head injuries from airborne debris. Among the most powerful accounts were residents of the Golden Spur Mobile Home Park, where the devastation was most complete and the death toll was highest. Survivor Patricia Colson said she heard the sirens but thought they had time. The television had been saying the storm was north of them. Then her neighbor called screaming that she could see it coming right at them. She grabbed her children and they ran for the ditch behind their house. When she looked back, she could see their home literally disintegrating. If they had waited another 30 seconds, they would have been killed. Tom Rivera, who lost his wife in the tornado, described a failure of warnings and communications. He said they heard some sirens, but they were faint. There was no emergency broadcast on television, and no police driving through with bullhorns. Nothing conveyed the urgency of what was coming. By the time they realized it was happening, it was too late to do anything but pray. Emergency management officials acknowledged shortcomings in the system. Butler County Emergency Manager Ray Weens explained they were working with what they had. But what they had was not good enough. The radar could not see what was happening. Warnings came too late, and dissemination methods could not reach everyone in time. At McConnell Air Force Base, military precision may have saved lives. Base Commander Colonel James Peterson said they had their own weather radar, and that it spotted rotation approaching. Teachers at Andover High School said the tornado struck the east wing directly. Teacher Margaret Wilson said those classrooms were completely destroyed. She said if students had been present, we would have been looking at dozens of fatalities. This could have been a mass casualty event. In the weeks after the tornado, meteorologists and emergency management officials conducted extensive reviews to understand how the warning system had failed so catastrophically. The most obvious deficiency was radar technology. The WSR-57 radar simply could not detect the critical internal storm structure that would have indicated rapid intensification. A National Weather Service meteorologist, Richard Gray, said we were essentially using 1950s technology to fight 1990s storms, and it was like trying to diagnose heart disease with just a stethoscope when you need an MRI. Communication breakdowns compounded the technological limitations. Warning information passed through multiple channels before reaching the public, creating delays at each step. The National Weather Service issued warnings to emergency managers, who activated sirens and notified media outlets, who then broadcast to the public. This multi-step process consumed precious minutes. Communications delays mattered. Public complacency toward warnings emerged as another critical factor. Post-event surveys revealed that many residents heard initial warnings but did not take protective action until they physically saw the tornado. That seeing is believing behavior cost lives in a situation where minutes mattered. Most concerning to meteorologists was the post-storm analysis, showing the tornado's rapid intensification and path change could not have been predicted with the tools available in 1991. Even with perfect execution of existing protocols, the warning system would have failed because it lacked the fundamental capability to detect the storm's evolution. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration concluded this was not human error, but a systemic failure of technology and procedures that were simply inadequate for detecting and warning for violent, rapidly evolving tornadoes. Despite the warning failures, the emergency response to the Andover tornado demonstrated remarkable effectiveness. Within an hour of the tornado, more than 500 emergency personnel had mobilized from across Kansas. The Kansas National Guard activated immediately, providing crucial manpower and equipment for search and rescue operations. Heavy equipment operators worked through the night, clearing paths through debris fields to reach potential survivors. Triage centers were established at undamaged schools and churches, providing immediate medical care before ambulances could transport the seriously injured to Wichita hospitals. Response efforts were swift and sustained. 225 injured survivors presented with typical tornado trauma, lacerations from flying glass, broken bones from collapsing structures, and head injuries from airborne debris. Among the most powerful accounts came from residents of the Golden Spur Mobile Home Park, where the devastation was most complete and the death toll highest. Survivor Patricia Colson recalled that she heard the sirens, but she thought they had time. The TV was saying the storm was north of them. Then a neighbor called screaming that she could see it coming right at them. Patricia grabbed her kids and they ran for the ditch behind their house. When she looked back, she could see their home literally disintegrating. If they had waited another 30 seconds, they would have been dead. Tom Rivera, who lost his wife in the tornado, described the warning failure. He said the system let them down completely. They heard some sirens, but they were faint. There was no emergency broadcast on TV, no police driving through with bullhorns, nothing that conveyed the urgency of what was coming. By the time they realized, it was too late to do anything but pray. Emergency management officials acknowledged the system's shortcomings. Butler County Emergency Manager Ray Weens explained that they were working with what they had, but what they had was not good enough. The radar could not see what was happening. The warnings came too late, and their dissemination methods could not reach everyone in time. At McConnell Air Force Base, military precision potentially saved lives. The base had its own weather radar, and it spotted rotation approaching. Base Commander Colonel James Peterson said they implemented their tornado procedures immediately, getting personnel to hardened shelters with about 10 minutes to spare. Even still, the damage to our housing areas was catastrophic. Teachers from Andover High School described what could have been a mass casualty event had school been in session. Teacher Margaret Wilson recalled that the tornado hit the East Wing directly. Those classrooms were completely destroyed. Had students been present, we would have been looking at dozens of fatalities. In the weeks following the tornado, meteorologists and emergency management officials conducted extensive reviews to understand how the warning system had failed so catastrophically. The most obvious deficiency was radar technology. The WSR-57 radar simply could not detect the critical internal storm structure that would have indicated rapid intensification. National Weather Service meteorologist Richard Gray explained they were essentially using 1950s technology to fight 1990s storms. It was like trying to diagnose heart disease with just a stethoscope when you needed an MRI. Outdated technology could not keep up. Communication breakdowns compounded the technological limitations. Warning information passed through multiple channels before reaching the public, creating delays at each step. The National Weather Service issued warnings to emergency managers who activated sirens and notified media outlets, who then broadcast to the public. This multi-step process consumed precious minutes. Public complacency toward warnings emerged as another critical factor. Post-event surveys revealed that many residents heard initial warnings, but did not take protective action until they physically saw the tornado. The phrase "seeing" is believing captured that behavior, and that delay cost lives in a situation where every minute mattered. Most concerning to meteorologists was the post-storm analysis showing the tornado's rapid intensification and path change could not have been predicted with the tools available in 1991. Even with perfect execution of existing protocols, the warning system would have failed because it lacked the fundamental capability to detect the storm's evolution. NOAA's official assessment concluded this was not human error. It said this was a systemic failure of technology and procedures that were simply inadequate for detecting and warning for violent, rapidly evolving tornadoes. Despite the warning failures, the emergency response to the Andover tornado demonstrated remarkable effectiveness. Within an hour of the tornado, more than 500 emergency personnel had mobilized from across Kansas. The Kansas National Guard activated immediately, providing crucial manpower and equipment for search and rescue operations. Heavy equipment operators worked through the night, clearing paths through debris fields to reach potential survivors. Triage centers were established at undamaged schools and churches, providing immediate medical care before ambulances could transport the seriously injured to Wichita hospitals. The Red Cross opened 5 emergency shelters within hours, housing hundreds of displaced residents. What distinguished the Andover response was the massive volunteer mobilization. By the morning after the tornado, more than 2,000 volunteers had arrived from surrounding communities. They formed human chains to clear debris, set up food distribution centers, and helped survivors recover what little remained of their possessions. The community response was the silver lining in this tragedy, said Andover Mayor Jack Whitson. People came from hundreds of miles away bringing equipment, supplies, and willing hands. They showed up and asked, "What can I do?" without being asked. This overwhelming community response. Volunteer efforts helped support Andover's recovery. Areas that emergency management officials estimated would take weeks to clear were processed in days thanks to community volunteers. The coordinated response became a model for future disaster management, demonstrating how professional emergency services and community volunteers could work effectively together. The Andover tornado became a catalyst for revolutionary changes in tornado detection and warning systems nationwide. The most immediate impact was on the deployment schedule for NEXRAD, Next Generation Radar, Doppler systems. Prior to Andover, the nationwide rollout of WSR-88D Doppler radar was proceeding at a measured pace, with budget constraints limiting installations to a few sites per year. After the tornado, Congress allocated emergency funding to accelerate deployment, with priority given to tornado-prone regions. Andover made it clear that radar coverage had to be expanded more quickly. Former National Weather Service Director Elbert Friday said that they could not wait another decade for modern radar coverage. The lives lost in Kansas demonstrated the life-saving potential of Doppler technology in the most tragic way possible. The difference between the old WSR-57 radar and the new Doppler systems was profound. While conventional radar could only see precipitation, Doppler could detect motion within storms, revealing rotation and wind patterns that signal tornado formation long before a funnel becomes visible. Beyond hardware improvements, the Andover disaster drove software enhancements that revolutionized tornado detection. Algorithms developed specifically to identify the rapid intensification patterns seen in the Andover storm were implemented nationwide. These algorithms could automatically detect rotation signatures and issue alerts to meteorologists, dramatically reducing reaction time. The tornado also spurred investment